Hello and welcome to a new episode of Mic'd Up with Mas, our mobile UA podcast series powered by Affle. Over the past year and so, we have all had to adapt to a more at-home lifestyle, and apps turned out to be a big part of this new normal. Be it for necessities or entertainment or staying connected, apps dominated our digital life. So, what's pumping the excitement factor for the app ecosystem in the coming year? To find that out, we are joined today by Simon Thillay, Head of ASO at AppTweak, and Mudasir Bashir, Business Director for MAS for Malaysia, Singapore, and Philippines. Over to you, Mudasir.
Thank you. Thank you, Karnika. Hey, Simon. It's a pleasure speaking with you here. A very warm welcome.
Thank you. Yeah. Pleasure to be here.
You're welcome. Yes. Again, a very warm welcome once again to this edition of Mic'd Up with Mas. We're really looking forward together with the listeners to an enlightening session with you. And before I get started, just, wanted to understand, before I get started with the questions, I wanted to get you talking about to our listeners with regards to yourself a little bit more, AppTweak as a company, and the work you do over at AppTweak.
Absolutely. So basically, AppTweak is an App Store optimization platform which helps marketers around the world optimize their App Store page and Google Play Store pages to basically just have the best visibility, the best conversion, and really boost organic and paid down. So if you're unfamiliar with the tool, I advise anyone to just go see apptweak.com. We have an amazing team that can also help explain in details how the tool works. Personally, my role as head of App Store optimization is to oversee a team of consultants who work on some of our top accounts, as well as assist some of my other teammates with research and really stay on top of any news related to App Store optimization, make sure we can come up with the best solutions for our clients, and work hand in hand with teams like product and data science to really come up with new features that are going to give the best insights about what's going on in the store, how developers can really improve what they're doing over there, and maximize their marketing efforts.
Okay, great. That sounds very interesting. Thanks for giving us this in. Obviously, what we've also seen over the past couple of years is a tremendous growth in terms of popularity of Android OEM and Apple search optimization platforms, which have really taken the lead when it comes to new user acquisition. And I'm sure it's very similar or along the same lines as what AppTweak.
Yeah, well, I think App Store optimization has been a niche for a while and still is a niche today, but is starting to really gain traction because with some of the recent changes that happened with or during COVID, although unrelated, more and more marketers have realized that when it comes to improving their performances in terms of user acquisition, the store is a bottleneck, basically. Like almost every single download has to come from either the Play Store or the App Store, sometimes a third-party store. But so as a consequence, this is a process that's not as easy in a way as some channels in paid UA, where it's almost like just a press of a button. But at the same time, it's a process that once you get started, you can really see the impact on any ad channel any marketing channel you're using, because in the end, it all passes through the store. And so there's always one way to do ASO that can help whatever other efforts you're also doing.
Yep, I totally agree. And since you touched upon how things have changed over the past couple of years, obviously the whole world has been in the midst of a pandemic. So, obviously off late, what we've experienced is these unprecedented times. And I wanted to get your views on the trends that you have seen in the past couple of years. 2020 and 2021 have basically been exciting times for the likes of e-commerce, gaming, and OTT apps. How do you think these categories will be impacted in a world which is pandemic-free, where people will basically get back to the freedom of movement?
It's a great question because I think it's not an easy one. First of all, because we're still struggling to know exactly when we're going to be in a pandemic-free world. We see that things are getting easier, but still people are taking time to readjust to what used to be considered a normal life. And this is where, when it comes to using apps, I think it's some of the biggest winners of lockdowns, people who would just benefit from people not being to go outside for anything, are not going to have exactly the same amount of success. But I still believe that there's not going to be a situation where we just go back to what it was before. I think these apps basically have been given a great platform in a way, or at least a great context in which they could really promote their unique selling propositions, promote the benefits that they can bring to users. And now there are a lot of people who didn't know about them, but who have found out and are going to weigh these benefits versus benefits of the material world, the physical world. And that means that when we look, for instance, at things like entertainment, gaming, obviously, here we have situations in which there's not going to be as much of a spike in traffic on most days as where we went when everybody in the world was locked down. Mm-hmm. But still, these are apps that are going to continue growing at a rather steady pace, because they've been able to promote their benefits. They've been able to also learn from what users were doing, and improve their products. And I think this is just part of the overall movement.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. In fact, I personally feel that this is kind of going to be a semi-permanent thing, given the type of convenience and ease of accessibility that users have experienced or gained over these past couple of years. And while OTT gaming, like you mentioned, could see a slight dip, but I'm confident areas like e-commerce or even your food tech or grocery tech apps would kind of remain on a post-pandemic lockdowns as well, because people really enjoy the convenience that they have now experienced out of these apps.
Definitely. I think the amount of apps that offered food delivery, but it's not just about food delivery from restaurants, which I think was what we already had in mind before the pandemic, but now it's also about groceries. It's about, in certain cases, alcohol delivery, because you want to have a drink at home and it's easier to get it delivered at any time of your weekend than if you have to find a shop that's open. And I think even in the case of travel apps did suffer quite a lot, obviously.
Yes.
And I think they're going to get back to a better shape. But what's also going to be interesting is how the value propositions that are going to be part of these apps are going to be somewhat different. I think we're going to have, just with what regulations are coming, safety, especially sanitary safety, has become more of a concern and something that apps have to show to convince people that they're the best they're the best option for them. And so I think this is just where we're learning that people as a whole are redefining some of their priorities, and that a lot of it has gone digital, and now it's really about how you can still give good benefits to your users and just have a great product.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think while we are talking about certain app categories which have seen tremendous growth during these times, what was really interesting to see was the acceleration that we saw when it comes to digitization in certain key markets or fringe markets or emerging markets, if you will. So my next question is basically around that. Now, Simon, the pandemic has basically accelerated this digital adoption, right, across these markets that I mentioned, which typically would be Asia Pacific, Africa, Latin America. What do you think are some of the opportunities app marketers can utilize here, as opposed to mature markets like Western Europe and the US?
I think the main opportunity here is just about the the differences that existed before the pandemic between those markets. Before the pandemic, we tended to look at Western Europe and North America as already fairly saturated markets. And so with the pandemic, we saw new needs, new desires that led to new products emerging and getting very popular. But this was really a situation where it's more about innovation, not so much in terms of a market, but in terms of new products coming out. And when we looked at emerging markets, this is where we would just say these are not fully matured yet, and that means that there was already potential for growth because there wouldn't be as much competition. But now one benefit is that those markets were also very changed by the pandemic, and now more people in these markets are turning to digital solutions for a lot of things. And in that case, it just means that these markets are becoming more attractive. And a great opportunity when we look specifically at App Store optimization, for instance, is knowing that the competition is going to be slightly less important. And as a result, it means that you can really find growth opportunities faster. Also, a lot of these markets don't speak English, or at least don't have a huge English proficiency. And this is where one thing I really love to do around ASO is look into localization, how to really adapt your product to the expectations, the habits of local customers. Here it means that apps that really want to stand out are not just going to release open new markets, but really look into how can I have a tailored solution for this market and find tremendous growth as a result, because these are markets where the attention you're going to give to customers is really going to give you a great return on investment.
Yeah, and I think the opportunities of scale are there as well, because all these markets just so happen to be the most populous markets across the globe, right? So the advantage or challenge is there as well, because when you want to scale up, you've got a huge population, huge revenue opportunities right there. Yeah, moving on to my next question. This is more from your experience, again, with regards to app categories. Are you seeing any new app categories that are gaining popularity? And what do you think is making such apps appealing to the user or users?
So I think the two newest categories in here, I'm always careful with the word category, because one big frustration I have is that there have been almost no updates to the store categories, whether on the App Store or the Play Store. The past few years, they've added a couple categories, but you have categories that really multiple realities in terms of what products you can find there. But in terms of emerging product trends, app trends, I think two things that are starting, couple of ventures around NFTs. We're seeing the topic in tech as a whole be very interesting. I think even before NFT last year, everything that happened around Robinhood, for instance, showed that fintech is really growing, and not just in terms of banking or payment solutions, but also trading. And also more recently, because of changes in regulations and in store policies, we're getting a lot more of betting apps to hit the store and hit good rankings in the store.
Mm-hmm.
And besides that, I would say just your usual suspects are still very strong. Gaming, OTT, they're still super high. If you just look at the top charts in markets like the US or India, you don't see anyone that really feels like you haven't heard of them before in the top places. You do have sometimes apps with really health issues that are also emerging a bit. I think mental health started being a topic with the pandemic, and you have apps there as well as solutions outside of app stores. And yeah, a couple of this, but to me, those are the big pictures where it's really about how the world is changing, and the App Store, the Play Store are more reflecting what's going on than creating trends by themselves.
Yep. Definitely the same over in this region as well. While in Southeast Asia, the two really breakout app categories for the past 1.5 year were education tech and health tech, like you mentioned, because obviously the reliance on those apps just suddenly increased. And I think on top of that, I agree. We are seeing a lot of popularity being gained on the trading and basically all your fintech apps as well. That is, they're now fast becoming your usual suspects as well because the popularity has grown so much. Moving on to the next one, Simon, we know apps are increasingly working towards bettering user engagement. Tell us a bit about the user engagement in-app trends that you have noticed.
So to be honest, this is a slightly more complicated question for me because focusing on ASO, we really tend to look more at the upper part of the funnel. But from what we see, because ASO does impact and gets impacted by what happens in app, the trend that's less about the products but more about the customers is that customers are becoming more demanding with the apps that they download. They're looking for very advanced solutions for products that really offer advanced functionalities. And an example of that, I would say, is when you look at music apps, for instance, and the fact that now in music, we're looking not simply for an app to play music, but we're looking for apps that are going to, from the already in the store, going to be able to promote more specific functionalities. So the need was already there, but it's that now people are actively expecting that while they are searching for music, you're not just promising music, but you're promising that you will have the best recommendations for their specific tastes. You will have breakout artists that people have never heard of. You will have podcast as well. Podcast is a super interesting topic right now. And so I think the first big thing in user engagement is people looking for advanced functionalities, and that also impacts user onboarding as a whole, which has always been crucial, but I think now more than ever. Another big thing we see is all the problematics around subscriptions. Even bigger of a topic in Western Europe and North America right now, because the fallout of the Apple versus Epic trial is that there is now going to be a question about how much of your subscription goes into Apple's pocket, for instance. But as a whole, subscriptions have been a very attractive monetization option for years, and we're going to a point where it still looks like the most stable option, but it's becoming harder to convince people to subscribe to something because they're now at a point where there's a certain subscription fatigue, and apps that really work on the paywall and how they present the subscriptions they offer as something that will satisfy customers are going to be at an advantage. So there's really a lot of product work around there.
Yeah, interesting you mentioned that, one of the key drivers for that, users wanting more convenience within the app or more elements that they are attracted to. And I think this is one of the factors which is giving a confidence boost to a lot of existing platforms or apps to convert themselves into super app. We have seen a couple of those changes recently in Southeast Asia, where a ride-hailing app has now become a super app. You can do deliveries, you can do food delivery, you can order anything under the sun. And similarly now with a popular low-cost airline app, which has just moved into the super app category because they have added all those functionalities where users, are given this idea that this is your one-stop solution. So yeah, makes sense. And I think we're going to see a lot of such changes coming about in the near future. With that, go ahead.
No, I was just completely agreeing with you. I think super apps especially are an interesting trend because with the old rules of ASO, where you only have one App Store page per app, there was even an argument to make about super apps being counterintuitive, because you would want to have like one developer who should rather develop multiple apps, work on possibly a certain branding, bundle them together, but have one app dedicated to each aspect. But with customers pushing more towards the will to have everything in one place, we do see those super apps become more of a trend than a developer having multiple products bundled together but requiring multiple downloads.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think that's the trend we've seen here as well. Lots of buzz around that in Southeast Asia and greater APAC region as well. Moving away from the engagement part to a very important aspect of app marketing nowadays, which is basically data utilization. Now, I wanted to check with you with app marketers choosing to favor mobile marketing for an obvious reason. Can you shed some light on a few best practices to create more impactful data-oriented marketing campaigns for these marketers?
Sure. I think, well, first of all, the whole challenge is that when trying to promote an app now, the first question that should come to mind is, what data do we have to understand our existing users? What data do we have about our target, and compare how much these two match, how you can go from one to the other, because you shouldn't be afraid of expanding beyond a sort of comfort zone, but just start by just trying to get an overview of the data and figure out what you can know. Impactful data marketing is basically data that tells you something about the user, helps you understand, and then just helps you review your message. And when it comes to ASO specifically, there are two types of data that I think we still don't use enough today. The first one is just the volume of traffic attached to a keyword. When we do ASO, we look at what keyword is going to bring the best traffic. It's a very solid basis, but we tend to forget that we can also ask ourselves, well, here we have data that literally tells us what people are searching for. So that means what they're interested in. And when you look at what results are displayed, you even see how a certain word corresponds to a certain intent. And for me, the keyword volume is something that I always try to push myself not to see as just something that's going to add traffic, but something that tells me about what users want. Now, the second big data point that I find is crucial in ASO is everything related to ratings and reviews. This is hugely impactful to know what people are interested in. It just tells you what they're interested in. People are volunteering the information, and you can just have a look at what they like in your product, what should be fixed, what they like or dislike in your competitor's product, and start tailoring marketing messages around that, and making sure that you can sell on your strong points, that you can attack competitors on their weak points by explaining you do it better, and really start by just considering the meaning of a data point to then connect dots and eventually turn that into a very impactful message that's here to say, here are the benefits, here's how my product is not just going to be a cool product, but is going to turn you into a better person, turn you into someone who's happier in a way, because you now have something that helps you satisfy a need or a desire that you had.
Interesting. And you mentioned obviously ratings and reviews. What sort of a correlation does that have to, let's say, a user base for a particular app? Because, obviously ratings, reviews being one part, and then typically a user base, how large it is, how massive, also gives you some sort of indications towards the popularity. And does that apply to what you guys do as well?
Well, the size of the user base definitely is always a signal that people like to take in to consider if this is a trustworthy app. For sure, if you see one app with only 10 reviews, all positives, and then you see another app with thousands of reviews, a few negatives, but overall still quite positive, you're going to trust the second app a lot more, because you just feel like this is something where you can follow other people and trust the group to be satisfied with one larger app. So there's always a problematic of convincing your user base to be active around giving you ratings and reviews, sharing the app, and I think not only with reviews and ratings, but even with newer tools that we've seen, for instance, with Apple launching Apple App Clips last year, we now have more tools for virality, more tools to really promote apps. So we're just in a situation where you have to always consider, how do I get to the next point?
Now, I agree with that. And of course, like with regards to search categories and, search phrases or keywords and so on and so forth. But my next question is really wanting to understand from your point of view, and this is to help any app marketer who's listening in. What do you think would be the 5 important things an app marketer must remember when optimizing content for App Store or the Play Store?
I guess the first one is just understand who your user is. Look at your user personas. You can have more than one. And really dive into how you can really appeal to them specifically. There are more tools to now have a more nuanced message than in the past. And that's really a good situation to start diversifying your messages and your efforts. Another that is often overlooked, in my opinion, is really regarding making sure you also look at the UI that is given to your user when they're going to interact with your different points of contact. So to give you a very concrete example, if we look at the App Store or the Play Store, one thing that we always say is creatives are a huge part of conversion there.
Yep.
One thing that's a bit different from one store to the other is what sort of creative can be found over there. And so because creatives are not going to show in the same manner, even though you may think that users are interested in the same thing about your app, there should be a design adaptation effort just to show the same message in the best lighting based on what store the user is in. And after that, I think a third advice I would give is make sure to coordinate with multiple teams. You can have the best ASO team or the best paid media team, the best influencer marketing team. If they don't speak together and if they don't align on what messages to deliver, on what formats to use, you're going to have drop-offs that could really have been avoided. And it's better to work as a whole, find synergies. And I think here the role of an ASO team is crucial, because ASO tends to be in the center of everything because of that bottleneck situation we talked about before.
Yep.
And ASO also has new tools coming out very often. Apple and Google are very active in trying to now give more benefits to developers, marketers in their store. And so this is where I think features, for instance, that have been announced need to be considered, not just by an ASO team, but by multiple teams.
So those are 3 important messages that you would have. Is there anything else you would want to add to that?
I guess other topics, because I think the question was for 5, are just things that I already brushed upon, but localizing when it comes to trying to adapt your message to the user. And I think finally, and this is something I learned from other people in the industry as well, always try to, as a result of all the previous 4, have a very human approach to how you're doing marketing. In the end, is things that you're going to be speaking to a person, and think about how you would want someone to speak to you when pitching a product. and that's going to really help you fit in with how digital marketing especially, is changing now.
Yeah, perfect. I do come across this quite often, and I think because how Mass as a platform is built, we are a multi-channel acquisition platform, and it is similarly like what you mentioned. Teams need to be aware of what everyone is doing. While we are a multi-channel platform, we have multiple strategies for certain clients that are running for acquisition. It is very, very important to sort of work in tandem, work in that synergy in order to drive the best value. So, yep, that sits well with us as well. Moving on to my next question, Simon. Want to check with you, what are some of the learnings app marketers will do well to carry forward in this new normal? Again, talking about a pandemic-free world, which I agree with you, we're not entirely in it yet, but definitely moving towards. So what do you think some of the learnings should be that these app marketers should carry with them into this new normal?
I will start and probably focus on one that I think really resonates with me, and it's that customers have time. We've always loved to say that app marketing especially is a battle for attention, and that you need to deliver your message as soon as possible in the shortest way possible. And part of that is still true. Like, you need to know how to give the most compelling argument first, because you still have to grab the attention. But what I think we've learned during the pandemic is that if you manage to grab people's attention, they will have some time to give you, and you don't have to then keep everything packed, and you can rather really use the attention they're giving you to expand further into the benefits of your product. And that thinking, for instance, also about trends in gaming, where the average session time always tended to be slower. We're now seeing people spend more and more time inside games, and that just shows that once convinced, unless your product is flawed in a way, you actually have a great potential to have stickiness in there, and that people will be willing to stay with a product as long as they're convinced they're getting the value. So it's not only about grabbing the attention and getting every new person out there to try your product, and it's also about speaking as to why this is a product they're going to keep using in the future.
Yeah, I think this is what has happened during the pandemic, right? A lot of these platforms, different categories, they were able to scale up acquisitions beyond their imagination or what they had forecasted. Now, with such a large user base, the key moving forward is to actually keep those users engaged and keep the LTVs high. I think that is something a lot of these app marketeers, app economy companies are basically looking into, and they should, because with such a huge acquisition you've gathered over an 18-month period, you need to retain and reward those users in one way or the other. So yeah, thanks for sharing those learnings with us. Now, adding a little bit of an speed element to our conversation, it would be nice to get your thoughts in the form of one word or one-liners or phrases. So basically, this is more of a rapid fire session. Are you ready for that, Simon?
Sure, I'll do my best.
Okay. Brilliant. So number 1, 5 buzzwords for trends in app marketing for the year 2020.
First of all, contextual marketing. Definitely a word that we started hearing quite a lot already, but that is going to keep buzzing and buzz even more in 2022. I think second, iOS 15 coming from ASO. I'm convinced that we're going to speak about iOS 15 a lot, especially in Western markets, but definitely all the changes that are coming to iOS, and the question mark also of how is Google going to react, because Apple sort of copied and improved certain functionalities of Google Play, to give more options to marketers on the App Store. And so obviously Google will react. So iOS 15 is my second one. Third, I guess privacy is not out of the picture. It's still going to be a question in app marketing. COVID, sort of a buzzword in a way. We're still going to debate how COVID has changed marketing. And finally, I will go back to less of a buzzword, but just because we both were able to share how this has a big impact. It's just the customers are human. It's always been part of marketing, so I don't know if it's a buzzword, but there is going to be more talks about how people address the person as a customer and not just a target that was defined by a couple of words on a whiteboard.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Customer will always remain a buzzword, irrespective of the times. Great. Moving on to number 2, a quote that you live by.
That's a good one. Not sure how much of a quote this is, but something I would definitely be able to repeat quite often. I'm not sure of the answer, but I can search. I'm certain some great researchers in the past have said this, so I will defend this as a quote. And I think it should apply to anyone in marketing, which is ask yourself questions, because it means ask yourself questions and search for the answer to just come up with common sense answers that are really going to solve certain problems.
Good. That's a very industry related quote. I think I'm gonna search that up and that could be one of my key quotes as well. Great. Moving on to the third one. What makes you remain growth focused?
I think growth in itself, it's such a vibrant industry, and just the taste of trying to understand people, understand how you can really get people to click certain buttons sometimes, and just making sure that you learn how to analyze behaviors and then act to deliver solutions. I feel like growth in itself has potential for anyone looking to grow as a professional.
Fair enough. Number 4, one app engagement trend that you are most intrigued by.
I'm going to go old school here. I'm going to say gamification, just because
Never gets old.
It's been a trend for a while. It's become less of a topic in the industry. You still hear it here and there, but you don't hear everyone say anymore, you have to gamify. And so I'm looking forward to finding out how gamification is still relevant and how it's changed from a few years ago.
Totally agree with that. We still keep hearing that in these markets, which is a good sign. Finally, one advice you will give to apps starting out in the market, in any market.
One advice is understand your metric. Understand whatever KPI you're going to choose, and make sure you understand the definition, make sure you understand how it's being measured, to make sure that it fits what you're trying to accomplish.
Great, that was nicely done. That concludes our discussion. Simon, thanks a lot once again for being part of this episode of Mic'd Up with Mas. Really appreciate you taking out the time, and it was a wonderful conversation, really an enlightening one, which has shed a great amount of light on the importance of ASO in today's world, and we'll always look forward to speaking with you again. Any parting thoughts before we conclude the session?
I guess thank you for having me first. It was really a pleasure to get to chat with you today. And for anyone listening, stay savvy, as a colleague of mine would say. And I wish everyone luck in finding out more trends for 2022, because it's a great time to be in App Store optimization and in the app marketing game.
Brilliant. Thanks again, Simon. Over to you, Karnika.
Thank you. Thank you, Simon and Mudasir. That was an extremely engrossing conversation. And it was quite insightful about how, you talked about the pandemic creating an ambience of innovation in the emerging markets, which has helped to minimize the differences between a market like, say, Asia Pacific and Western Europe. And another thing that I found very interesting in the conversation was about how the users are starting to get very involved with the app's journey in terms of product development, and they're not really shy of demanding better apps. So, 2022 is definitely going to be a very exciting time for the global app ecosystem. And we are going to keep a track of all the latest industry trends in this podcast channel. So, stay tuned and don't forget to follow our channel for timely updates. This is Konika signing off.